Now we're going to look at pruning a little bit, and pruning is something that we do ideally every year from the year you set your trees out until the year that you make the final pruning cut down to the ground line. And the reason we prune is that we can build a tree to the shape that we want with pruning and training. And then after the tree gets a little bit of age on it, we can keep the tree fruitful throughout the canopy if we prune. Light is the key to growing fruit. It's all about capturing sunlight. And if you let a tree grow, especially if you let it grow without pruning for several years, it's going to get so thick that the only place it gets enough sunlight to have fruit is going to be in the very top of the tree. So our goal as we prune is to thin out the tree so that we get sunlight all the way through, and by doing that we can get fruit from the ends of the branches all the way back in. Like we've got fruit spurs back here, we'll get fruit here if we can keep sunlight in here. Another thing that we do when we prune is try to eliminate certain disease problems. And as I stand here looking at this tree, I can see some of the things that we need to get rid of. We've had fire blight. Fire blight will give you cankers on the wood, and you might want to look at that and pass it around. And if you don't get rid of it, then you've got a place right in the tree for new infection to come in this coming year.
Some of that off.
So if we can identify it when we prune, yeah, here's a good one. It's going to be very difficult in many years to get fire blight out of this tree, because a lot of those, well, like there's another shoot that's fire blighted. And as we look at the tree, we can pick out some of these things, but you're going to miss some of this as you prune. And so it's not entirely foolproof. Yeah, you've got some cankers that came from several years ago that are overwintering. But open the tree up, the sunlight, the air movement, and if you're spraying the trees where you can get better spray coverage, you're going to help the tree just by pruning, because the more light, the more air movement you get through, the less chance you're going to have of a lot of the diseases that we have in fruit production of becoming a problem. Most of the diseases that we see are tied into temperature and hours of leaf or fruit wetness. And by having a tree that's open to good light exposure, after a rain, after a fog, after a heavy dew, the tree's going to dry off quicker. And there's going to be less chance that that disease is going to be able to develop. The fungal spores are not going to necessarily germinate and start to grow. And whereas if you get a tree that's real dense where it hasn't been pruned, it's going to be a lot more of a problem trying to control diseases. So pruning is a disease control practice, and pest control practice. It also renews the fruit wood, because as we prune, we're going to get new growth coming around some of the pruning cuts, and that new growth is going to be where some of the best quality apples will be in the next few years. As shoots get older, they lose their ability to have as much fruit as what they once could have. And so by pruning out some of the old wood and encouraging new wood to grow, we're going to continually renovate the bearing surface in the tree. And it's possible, like on the trees that you grafted today with M7, with good pruning and training and regular care, there's no reason that tree shouldn't give you good fruit for the next 20 to 30 years. Now, on a young tree, in addition to looking at opening it up to light and getting rid of disease, we're going to prune to shape the tree the way we want. And of course, when you've got trees like this that are mature, you don't have that luxury anymore. The tree's telling you how it wants to grow, and you just work with it. But with a young apple tree like yours, that if it grows the way that I would anticipate it will in the garden, you're going to have a nice straight shoot on the tree, and there may not be any side branches on that at all. And when I set that out, then in its final place, I'll cut the top out of the tree about 6 or 8 inches above where I want the side branches to come. And that way, the bud right next to where you cut grows straight up in the air. That's the trunk, and it's going to extend on up in the air. But down below where you cut it off, you're going to get side buds and put some side branches on that tree. So cut it about 6 to 8 inches above where you want the bottom limbs. In a commercial apple orchard, I like the bottom limbs of the tree somewhere between 18 and 24 inches above ground. Now in your yard, you may want to have them a little bit higher so that it's easier to work under the tree, mowing the grass or whatever. But you don't want to have them a lot higher, because the higher you start the bottom limbs, the higher you have to let the tree grow to get much fruit off. And I like to keep things fairly close to the ground, because the more fruit that you can get from the ground, the easier it is, and if you're in it for commercial business, the cheaper it is. Once you have to get your feet off the ground, it pretty much doubles your cost of production. So I go for a tree that's relatively low, so I started off relatively low and then build it from that point up. We'll use the first 3-4 years of a tree's life to get the framework we want, and it should be starting to fruit after that time. And from that point on, we're trying to encourage consistent cropping and good quality fruit by our pruning program and through letting light into the tree. Now, fruit buds on most of our fruit trees are actually formed the year before the fruit shows up. So the fruit buds, the apples for this year, are already on this tree in the form of the fruit buds. And we can see them out on the ends of the spurs and some of these shoots. And so as we prune now, we're going to thin the crop some. We're going to cut some fruit buds off, but that's okay. Because if we've got a healthy tree, you can set a full crop of fruit on about 10% of the fruit buds that'll be on the tree. And if you let it try to have too much fruit, you'll end up with small fruit, poor quality fruit. You may see some tree breakage. Also on some varieties, especially like Golden Delicious or Fuji, you're going to go into what we call alternate bearing. You'll have a big crop this year, you won't have a crop next year. The third year you'll be back to the big crop. If you want to crop it every year, you get that crop thinned down early in the summer. We do part of it by pruning, then we follow up coming in and just pulling off fruit when we see that there's too much on the tree. So pruning has a lot of effects on the way a tree grows.